everyone. Welcome to another episode of No Shame, No Blame, a podcast about emotional healing, growth, and breaking generational cycles. I'm your host, Brandi. And for the first time ever, I have no co-host. I know, ever, right? We're only 3 weeks into the show, but we're already switching up the format. If you remember, I did mention that we were going to be having guests. Well, that was the plan, but I had to pivot. Once I get into the reasons why and later in the episode, I think you'll forgive me. But before we start, I really wanted to take some time to touch on the political climate we're in currently. And I know that we've said the podcast isn't political, and that's true. But what we do here is have difficult conversations. And I want to welcome people from all walks of life to be a part of this community. The only request is that we keep it respectful. There are ways to discuss different viewpoints without it being argumentative. So let's keep in mind that the goal around these types of conversations isn't to change anyone else's mind. It's simply to gain understanding on how someone else maybe sees the world. So back to my point, even though we aren't political, I would like to think we're still decent human beings. So I feel it's important to address what's been happening the past few weeks. I'm sure we all understand that life and many situations in it have gray area. Right? The world is not black and white. It's full of various shades of gray, matter of fact. But one thing that is not gray, that has never been gray and never will be gray, is human rights. Yes, I said human because that word is inclusive and that's what unites us. Okay? We should be doing that right now in a time where an administration is aiming to further divide a country already torn apart through politics. And I say all this because no matter what your political stance is, the thing that unites us is a moral compass that knows right from wrong, black from white. As an example, people of diverse backgrounds being blamed for a tragic air traffic accident 24 hours after it happened doesn't even make sense. But I guess it goes to show what they think about the American people, right? And how easy we can be manipulated into believing something that is impossible to be proven so early on. Not to mention that statistics show the most educated, intelligent, hardworking people in this country are actually Black women. That's right. Despite generations of oppression and marginalization, Black women, a group under the umbrella of DEI, are more educated than the people running our country. Okay? They have proven time and again what they're capable of. And actually, they should be recognized and applauded for that. Instead, what we're seeing is an obvious ploy by an administration to attempt to create a country run by cisgender white males, where anything else is considered second class, or as we were seeing them attempt to do, dehumanize specific populations like immigrants. And you know what? I don't even care where you stand on the issue of immigration. All right, let's be real. Democrats deport illegal immigrants too. But what they don't do is manipulate the law and attempt to kidnap children from school in order to obtain what they believe to be illegal immigrants. Okay, and I say believe because they don't even need proof. It's just like a grab now, ask questions later type of situation. And allowing this type of profiling is a dangerous game. So something I highly recommend is that everyone educate yourself. Okay, do your own research on these issues and see where you stand. Because the more you know, the more informed your decisions will be. Now let's get into today's episode. So as mentioned earlier, I originally did have a guest host, and I was actually going to have a whole different episode topic that we were going to cover. But life has been lifing the hell out of me lately. And part of what I've been working on is practicing gratitude in all areas of my life. So, I mean, it's not really like a New Year's resolution type of a thing, but, just like any other person, I'm typically grateful when things are going good in my life. And by good, I mean the way I want them to go, right? I wouldn't say I'm ungrateful or anything, but just after my experience with cancer, I've really been struggling with emotional regulation. And that really frustrated me. It took a long time for me to learn how to control my initial emotional responses. And so I wanted to try to get back to where I was initially before I ended up getting sick. And of course, I knew that it would take practice, and another reason is that when I got a call that I was in remission, it was interesting. I guess the best way to describe it was that I felt like someone had hit me with a defibrillator and restarted my heart. Like, it was genuinely the first time I had felt an emotion so strong for almost the entire year last year, And initially I kind of thought it was just because I had been depressed. But again, around the new year, I actually realized I had really become apathetic as a trauma response in order to cope with what I was going through. I somehow detached or maybe even turned off my emotions. And now that they're coming back online, I guess, for lack of a better word, um, I not only feel like out of control in regards to how I respond to things, but I was also getting overwhelmed by what I was feeling. And that made me obviously feel even more out of control and again, just more likely to react, right? So I decided the best way to try to combat all of that is to try a little experiment. I decided I was going to try the practice of gratitude. I didn't want to make it anything complicated or like write down anything or have to practice something every single day. I have a full-time job, I'm a mom, I'm doing the podcast, I'm busy. But it was one of those things where anytime I just caught myself maybe like complaining about something or, just kind of like being in a negative mood, I would try to think past the problem and see the lesson. And let me tell you, the timing of me deciding to do this could not have come at a better time because it was like the signal to the universe to test me. But okay, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let me explain where it all started. So, I've always been someone who's had a positive outlook on most situations for as long as I can remember. Like, I think that's just my natural temperament. I've always been a happy person. And I guess I didn't realize how important that really was until I was around 26 or 27 years old. And I was a facility manager working in a school district and had an older man who was my night lead as an employee. And he was really kind, but after getting to know him, he had led a tough life. And, he always talked about how he had really bad luck and was cursed or things like that. And he just always had a negative outlook on every situation. I mean, he would come into work and his shift didn't start till 12:30, and he would come in such a bad mood. Like sometimes he would have a million things that he'd be complaining about, and other times it would just be from one interaction that he maybe had at like a gas station earlier in the day, and that one interaction would keep him in a bad mood all day. And he would come in and he'd be like, "Oh, watch, because this happened this morning, I'm gonna have a bad night tonight, and it's gonna be awful, it's gonna suck." And, oh my gosh. One day I just kind of was like, I'm so tired of it. Like, can I just make you a deal tomorrow? Can you just try to come in and just be positive? Can you just think good thoughts? Hey, like, I'm gonna have a good evening. So nothing's gonna go wrong. Like, so we agreed to that. And I don't know if he really believed it or not, but the next day when he came in, he stuck to his agreement, said nothing but positive things. Again, the following day, he did say that like the night went well, nothing really crazy happened, but he's like, but that doesn't mean anything. It's just a coincidence. And he just went right back to his normal ways. But that always really stuck with me, especially when I started hearing like terms like people saying like we create our own reality. So, like people talk about manifestation or prayer often, right? Because side note, they're the same thing. Not sure if you guys are ready for that conversation, but anyway. But again, people talk about manifestation or prayer often, but a lot of people, if they aren't religious or spiritual, will just dismiss them, right? But it becomes a lot harder to dismiss things when we use a scientific term like energy, right? When we talk about that alongside a term like a law of attraction, which, technically can't be measured scientifically. Um, so basically, the idea is that of law of attraction is that positive thoughts and beliefs attract positive experiences, and the same for negative thoughts and beliefs. Again, as I just mentioned, this literally can't be measured scientifically. We have no factual information or data to support a claim that thinking something changes the outcome of something else. This is only theory, right? So that's why I'm not calling it scientific principle, okay? But the only reason, like I said, we can't prove it is because we can't physically see a thought and prove what somebody was thinking before something happens. And the other term that I mentioned, though, was energy. And that can be measured. So, example is food, right? Calories is just energy. And we know how much energy we're putting into our bodies because that's the fuel that we need to function, right? To help it do all of its functions. And then when we talk about energy expenditure, we talk about that in terms of like workouts and movement and things like that. Okay. So whether or not we can prove that that's true doesn't really matter, right? Because we understand that energy is real. And let me break this down just like an extra little step. Mental energy is a real thing, right? And we all know that because you can't sit there and focus on something for hours and hours and hours without taking a break, right? You get exhausted, your brain gets tired, okay? And eventually you will need to sleep and recharge, okay? When else do we use the term recharge? Oh, yeah, with your phones. When they run out of battery, aka energy. Okay, again, so now that I've established mental energy is real, we'll get into this. Through science, we know everything does have a vibrational frequency, which includes the human body. Okay. Another way to think about this is animals and how they're more sensitive to vibrations. They can pick up on earthquakes or changes in the weather before we can, right? So, a vibration is obviously a form of energy. Also, a form of energy, sound waves. How we produce sound waves, music, humming, singing, language, right? The words that we speak every single day. This is why our words are powerful, okay? And I think we've all heard of like the plant experiment. If you haven't, it's essentially where kids were shown how destructive negative comments can be to somebody, like in the sense of bullying, right? And so two plants were kept in, under controlled environments. They were both, getting the same amount of water, the same amount of light, enclosures were the same, all of these things, except that they each had their own speakers that people could talk directly to the plant. And the only rule about this was that one plant would only receive positive comments and one would only receive negative comments. Okay. After a certain period of time, they observed the plants, and the one that was hearing mean words seemed to look wilted and droopy, and its counterpart, the plant who had been receiving praise, was healthy and thriving. Okay. The only difference between them was the words that were spoken to them. So, one more example that I want to bring up is how sound can affect our energy through music, right? All around the world, no matter what language we speak, universally, we know that the tempo or rhythm of music, if it's upbeat or if it's sad, right? And that's important because it sets a tone, right? A mood. Think about when you're at a party. Do we play sad music? Why not? Do we play happy music at a funeral? Not unless we call it a celebration of life, in which case, again, we're playing upbeat music. And so it does affect us. And if it didn't, why would we dance when we're happy? Right? Why do you want to like play slow music when you're sad? It's because it matches your frequency. So in that moment, it's comforting. Like calls to like. What would happen if you were crying and you put on a song that you usually listen to when you're happy? It would probably make you feel uncomfortable, to be honest, and you would probably want to turn it off because it's trying to force a frequency shift that you're not ready for. You're resisting it, right? Try it. Try that next time you're upset about something and tell me what happens. Anyway, the same idea applies to words. Okay, what we say creates vibrations. And maybe not even just what we say, maybe even how we say it. I don't know. I'm not a linguist. Just my thoughts free flowing here. Or what about when you're in a great mood and you get around somebody who's in a negative one and all of a sudden they can shift your mood, right? If you don't set up boundaries, that's because sadness, anger, things like that are low frequencies. Fear are all low frequencies, pulling you down to that lower level. Okay, what do we know about gravity? It pulls everything down to it. And that makes it easier to drop down into a lower frequency than it is to stay up into the higher zones. It's hard to stay in a higher frequency when you surround yourself with low frequency people and things, okay? You're fighting what naturally happens. Like calls to like. It would be far easier if you could surround yourself with things and people and places that shift your frequency higher, right? When you feel called to heal and grow, that would be great. But life, we know, is not always that easy. And this leads me to explain what the hell has been happening with me? So the last month and a half has really been a crazy ride for me, to say the least. When everything around you seems to be going wrong and when it rains, it pours kind of vibe, that's where I'm at right now. So, like, where to begin? Let's see. So, okay, in October is when I found out I was in remission. And let's jump to December, is I guess when the first major thing happened. And that's that my vacation home actually had my furnace go out and I had to fly out there and get that replaced, right? And then let's speed up to January, at the beginning of January, in my home here in Denver. I had a slow drip from the bathroom faucet for quite some time. And I don't know what happened. Just one Saturday when we had that deep freeze a few weeks back, I woke up and I don't know if the seal failed, but the tub was just like constantly running. And once everything was taken apart, there was nothing to fix or to replace. There was just pipes. And so I had to, get a plumber out here. Oh my gosh, he ended up having to cut into the wall from the bedroom behind the bathroom to get into the pipes. And he ended up having to cut into the pipes, replace all of them. It just ended up being this whole thing because, of course, it could never be easy. So, anyway, I had to deal with that. Right around that same time, I ended up getting sick, which I'm still trying to get over. So, I apologize if my voice does sound a little weird these past few episodes or so. I ended up totaling my car. Thankfully, I'm all right. And my grandmother, who I am her caregiver and her legal guardian in the system, still lives at her house with my grandfather, but she has Alzheimer's and she wandered for the first time a few weeks ago. And they found her about 1.5 miles from their house, which is about a 40-minute walk for you or me. But my grandmother's 75 and she broke her ankle some years ago and it didn't heal correctly. So she walks a lot slower than you or I. I mean, half our pace, if that. So, I mean, she was probably out there for like close to 2 hours, which is just awful. And nothing but this thin little shirt in the dark. And, and then that same weekend, my siblings and I all got together to talk about her care and what was going to need to happen, obviously. And we already didn't have the best history, of having difficult conversations. And with my emotional state being what it was or is, as I've mentioned at the beginning of this episode, I lost total control of my emotions. And it's not something I'm proud of, to be honest, but I kind of went off on everyone. And it's really out of character for me. But, instead of reacting, they actually all just like let me get it out and seemed to understand how I was feeling. And unfortunately for me, that opened up the floodgates, for lack of a better term, because after that, I honestly could not stop crying. Like, I realized now in hindsight that my body was purging all of my emotions from cancer. It was such a traumatic thing to go through. And so I cried for hours nonstop. And after so much emotions and dealing with so much, I was physically drained. Kind of fast forwarded to Monday, and I had decided that I was going to take an afternoon nap after work, just a couple hours. Well, I ended up sleeping through my alarm, which was what was supposed to wake me up to meet this week's guest. And I am completely bummed because it took us some time to actually get our schedules to line up. And I am so excited to host our first guest. So anyway, that's why I'm actually here alone this week. Michael is probably just getting back from his vacation around this time as well. And yeah, my kids are now also sick. And just as they were recovering, or so I thought, my youngest ended up with an ear infection. So yeah, it has been a hectic month. On top of all of those things, again, like normal things were still happening. I was still in the process of buying out my ex from our house and getting this podcast off the ground, getting back into the swing of things at work. Like I said at the beginning, life has just been lifing on my end. And as stressful and frustrating and hard as this stuff can be to deal with, especially all at once, I'll handle all of this shit with a smile on my face because I'm grateful. Like, really, no, I'm truly grateful that it's not cancer, right? Because that's what it was last year. I'm grateful that, my grandmother will come live with me and my daughters, and we'll take care of her and try to prevent stuff like this from happening to her again. And hopefully, create more memories with her and my grandpa. Just practicing being grateful, gratitude. It's important. And even though I'm struggling with emotional regulation and after yelling at everyone and going off my siblings the way I did, the fact that them and I were able to apologize to each other on the same night, stuff like that has never been able to happen with us, and the same with my car situation. I've been thinking about getting a new one for a while. I mean, my car wasn't very old, but man, I had a lot of issues and it was really a money pit. I was just wasting my money trying to keep up with all the things that were going wrong. So, I mean, I guess it's about time to get a new one. Yeah, I would have preferred not to get in an accident, trust me. But again, I'm grateful that it was only a few bumps and bruises. You see, none of these things are life threatening. None of these things have the potential to steal me from my kids. So I'm grateful. Believe me when I say things can always be worse. And by focusing on the silver lining or the lesson in a situation, maybe you attract more positive things into your life. If you want to sit in the low frequency and play victim, I mean, nothing's going to change. Things are just going to keep becoming more difficult or staying exactly as they are. And listen, I know better than most how hard it is to believe in something when you have every reason not to. But if you're really tired of your life going the same way, then stop thinking the same way. What does it hurt to think and speak more positively? The situation can't get any worse, right? So you're risking nothing by raising your frequency. And maybe that's why we're all so drained all the time. We're trapped in cycles doing things that don't match our frequency, constantly fighting against the natural pull of like calls to like. And sometimes situations can't be helped, right? I mean, instead of being able to change the lower frequency, then maybe what we can do is spend time refilling our cup if we've been around people or situations that drain it, right? Recharge, like I mentioned at the beginning. Okay. So, yeah, your situation is draining and you can't change it. Then, like I said, just take time for yourself to do things that make you happy, that bring you joy, that give you the energy to do it all over again tomorrow, you know? And I'm only human myself, right? Everything I'm going through, yeah, I'm tired of dealing with all of these things, trust me. But I don't know. I also know that something greater must be coming, right? I mean, when I was diagnosed with cancer, I decided to focus on just moving from a place of love in every aspect of my life. And at the time, I didn't even realize it. But yeah, at that time, I was deciding to vibrate from the most high frequency. And even though I still operate from there, I'm not going to lie, I definitely feel like I'm at rock bottom. Okay. I'm still recovering from cancer and dealing with all of these things that I've mentioned. And it weighs heavy, really heavy. I'm only human, but because I'm at the bottom, I also know that the only way for me to go is up. So I'm choosing to send out positive vibrations so that I attract positive outcomes. Let's try it together and see how it works. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for sticking with me today. I know this was different. And like I said, there's so many unexpected things happening the past few weeks. I just had to adapt and make sure I brought you something. So for this one, I guess we could say I'm healing in real time. As always, make sure to take care of yourself and your mental health, especially with everything going on right now. Turn off the news for a bit, set down your phone, maybe go stand in the sunshine, touch the grass, ground yourself. If you've enjoyed this episode and would like to join as a guest to share a personal lesson that you have learned on your own journey, feel free to shoot us an email at nsnbpod@gmail.com. That's nsnbpod@gmail.com. You can also visit our website at www.nsnbpod.com. There you can catch up on the latest episodes and find all our social media pages. We would appreciate it if you would like, follow, and share to help spread the word about our show. More people may be needing this podcast than you realize right now. That's nsnbpod.com. We will all be okay as long as we stand for what's right and refuse to be divided. Have a good few weeks, everyone. Until next time. Bye.